let's discuss shopping, shall we? More than a third of shoppers have been blocked from paying with cash since the start of the COVID crisis, prompting calls for urgent action to protect the millions who rely on the UK's critically endangered cash network. The consumer group, which said mixed messages about the safety of cash, was partly to blame. The Bank of England has since clarified that any risk from handling cash should be low. Of course, this is in relation to the spread of the virus itself. But has the pandemic spelt the end for physical hard cash? Let's get the view now of my next guest. I'm delighted to welcome to the show Harry Wallop, who is a consumer journalist. Hi, Harry.
Hi.
Well, look, I'm not going to lie. I'm one of those terrible people that when I get home of an evening, Harry, I empty my pockets, all the coppers and 2-penny pieces and 5p's, and just make a mess around the place. And I've got one of those enormous whiskey bottles, which eventually I will take to the bank. I'm not going to miss cash. What about you?
Well, no, I'm not going to miss cash either, really. But I do appreciate there are an awful lot of people who really like cash for a number of reasons, not least that it helps them to budget. And I think that's the main problem with cashless. You have no real sort of control over how much you're spending, especially a lot of things like, if you live in London and you use contactless to go in and out of the tube, and there's all sorts of flexible pricing, what price have they actually charged you? You never quite know, and often it's far too late when there's a mistake being made. So I'm really sympathetic towards people who hate the idea that cash is essentially on the way out.
Indeed, and I guess it's a generational thing. If I think of my 14-year-old son, Harry, the idea of handing him a note or coins is completely alien. He's got his prepaid MasterCard, which we carefully control, and, he would never countenance going around with money in his pocket.
No, and of course, because of the pandemic, I've often now left the house for possibly quite a long, to go on a train journey, to go to a meeting, and realised I've left my wallet at home. And because you can get away with spending a whole day out now without your wallet, because it's all on your phone, because you can now pay using Apple Pay or Google Pay, and then suddenly you realise that there is something that you actually do need a card for. Please put your card in this machine, and you get caught out. So that's not even cash. That's actually a card. You can survive without cards as well. But I think it is a sad. I think most people wouldn't mind if coins were got rid of. Right. They are a menace. I think the actual cash itself, though, I think there will be many, many years before we completely get rid of cash.
Indeed, and it's nice to have that discretionary capacity, isn't it, to either tip a member of staff if you're worried that the cafe or the restaurant is going to actually take the tips, then you can just hand your server a £5, quite generous, I'll grant you, but for perhaps a big meal with a group, that's appropriate, or even just something as simple and human as empathetic as giving somebody a bit of cash on the street that seems like they're on their uppers.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And of course, some people are appalled when they see a busker or even someone selling the big issue, which is now happening with contactless machines. You think, well, how else are they expected to take any money if they don't have a machine? But there is a whole infrastructure of very small transactions, things like, your primary school fair, when we're allowed to have school fetes again, all the sort of the tombolas. They don't really have the facility to take cards or contactless at the moment. Things are changing. There are some outdoor markets that have a little kind of what's known as iZettle. That's one of the brands, those little tiny machines. But that, again, will take quite a few years. So we do need cash. And I think, banks, of course, it's in banks' interest to really push contactless. It's very expensive for the banks to physically handle cash. So they're very keen. They loved the idea that there was a temporary increase to the contactless limit from £30 to £45. And I'd be very surprised if that gets reversed after the pandemic is over, because the banks want to keep it that way.
I obviously very sympathetic to those groups, particularly older members of my audience who do worry about having a card and just appreciate the reliability and the certainty of cash. However, for the long-term prospects of the economy, I wonder whether Britain could do very well embracing cashless, because I wonder whether it actually could feed through to a more dynamic economy, a digital economy, and potentially just more wealth for the nation.
Well, I mean, famously, there are billions of pounds, sort of metaphorically, but in some cases, actually, literally, stuck down our sofas. There's an awful lot of cash that never leaves the system, which slightly baffles some economists. We know how many technically notes and coins have been printed, and they're not actually circulating. They're stuck somewhere. So either people are storing it under their mattresses, or they just have kind of forgotten that birthday £20 that was given to them. So yes, I mean, if we all went cashless, that would, in a very literal sense, release some money into the economy.
Quick words on the deficit. I'm not going to ask you to solve that one in a single answer, Harry, but the Chancellor is considering an online sales tax to bring a few billion in. What do you think about that? I mean, do you think that the online retailers are there for the taking?
Well, yeah, I mean, all comes back to Amazon, really. And I'm afraid this is Amazon's fault, because they spent many years not paying what most people thought was a fair level of tax. Amazon pointed out you pay tax on profits, and they weren't very profitable. But there was a bit of jiggery-pokery went on. I mean, Amazon now do pay quite a bit more tax, £290 million at the last count. But, online retailers have boomed during lockdown. Retail sales have returned to higher levels than before lockdown, and a lot of that money has shifted online, and a lot of traditional retailers have suffered. So it kind of makes sense that the big boys, the people who make the majority of their sales from online, if they started to pay just a little bit of tax, and the idea is this would be a tax on turnover, not on profit. I can see it would make sense, and it would probably be quite popular.
Harry Wallop is well worth hearing on all matters consumerism. harrywallop.co.uk is his fantastic website, and you can find him on Twitter at @HWallop. Thank you so much, Harry. There you go. So I have an answer in terms of my discarded coins. Give them to a worthy charity. That is absolutely right.